George the Tech.
Hey everybody, it's George the Tech, and our kicking off. This is the very first free Ask Me Anything webinar where we bring in a guest and we just talk about a specific topic that guest is knowledgeable about, which is really, in this case, actually all of audio engineering. But the main reason he's here is really to talk about Waves audio plugins. So I really want you guys to feel free to ask Michael anything about what he's done, his background, who he's worked with, what his preferences are, anything at all, because that's what the whole point of this presentation is today. So without further ado, I'm not going to read you a long, boring bio. It's pointless. You've already read the bio on all our social media. You know who this man is. I'm honored to have him as my guest. Here he is, Michael Pearson-Adams. How you doing?
Hello, mate.
How you doing today?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
G'day. So you're down in Brisbane, Australia. You
Yes.
spent a long time in the States before that, right?
20 years.
20 years. So you've been there, done that, and so you're back in Australia. Are you back where you grew up?
No, it's a slightly longer story than that. Brisbane is my hometown, but I was born in the UK.
Oh,
Went to boarding school in the UK and France, and moved to Australia when I was a young teenager. So I'm way more Australian than I ever was a Brit. So
Yeah.
it's like when I hit Australia, I was home.
Yeah.
And I felt like I belonged. So it's but I was in the States for a long time.
It must feel good to be back, though. It must feel good.
It's kind of weird. It's that there's when you've been gone from the country you're a citizen in for this long, you kind of have to start again.
Sure. Yeah.
So the only thing that they really remember is your passport. Everything else is gone. You're basically a new immigrant again. So it's
Including like credit, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's it's going to be a challenge for a while, but these things too shall pass. But yeah, it's just good to be close to family again.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, just so everybody knows how things are going to work today, because I didn't really say, so we have a Q&A box. Everybody here is welcome to, at any time, start putting your questions in the Q&A box. Don't put them in the webinar chat. That's just for us. If you want to communicate among and amongst yourselves, I will allow you to do so right now by clicking this button. Now you can chat amongst yourselves. I didn't have that on before. But if you have questions, type it in the Q&A box for Michael. And
Do I get to see that special box?
I don't know. You're a co-host. I would think if you click the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, you might be able
There's
to
a
see
Q&A box. Oh, there's a Q&A box. Wow.
Boom. Yes, you can see it. Well, I'm going to read it out loud anyway. So let's start off with a name that's familiar to me, maybe to you, I don't know. But Toby Ricketts says, with the rise of, if we're getting right into it, with the rise of AI and machine learning, does Waves expect to incorporate some of these advances into plugins like DeepBreath, which would benefit enormously from AI technology?
That's an interesting question.
Tell us a lot of detail, but have they considered stuff like that?
So DeepBreath is a plugin that's been around for very close to 25 years. From my perspective, it was way ahead of its time when we released it. Was
it designed for singing? Essentially, was it really?
Yes, it was. It was pretty much predominantly everything we did at that point in time was aimed at the music market.
Sure. Yeah.
It wasn't really until just after the Renaissance bundle that we started to focus on more what can we do with
spoken word,
post-production as well as music. And DeepBreath was something that we kind of half was in the music industry and half was in post.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges, because of the fact that this is what I refer to as vintage code, because it is so old, is the latency on it is fairly long because of the way the plugin was written. One of the things that we released about 3 or 4 years ago was a new plugin called Sibilance, which uses new technology that we've created that lets us separate different parts of the voiceover sound, be it sung or be it spoken, and lets us identify different specific characteristics of that vocal. In that case, it was the S and the sibilance, and you get to be able to choose how much, if any, you want. Works completely differently to an EQ. It's not completely out of the realms of possibility, getting back around to the question, that we could be considering using that same technology for something to modernize a plugin like Deep Breath.
I had no idea it's been around that long. 25
It's been
years.
around. It's been around that long. So it's definitely something that has been talked about. I can't tell you at what level, but got a flinch in my eye. But yeah, it's one of those things that yes, it's on the table.
It's on the table. Yeah, anything's on the table now, I would imagine.
Well, the thing with AI is, like, I mean, we're using a ton of AI with stuff that we're designing right now, and we've pumped something close to 2.5 million audio files into the 4 main neural networks that we've been working with in 2 or 3 of the products, and it's pretty astounding what you can create.
Is it cumulatively getting smarter and smarter? Is that kind of the idea here?
One of the things that you have to do is you have to make sure that the examples that you give the neural networks that you've created have good examples, and good. By good examples, I mean good quality audio, bad quality audio of all kinds, so that it has an idea of how to identify what is good and what is bad and what needs fixing by itself in certain ways. One of the things that we don't really want to do is take away the control of the user. So at this point, with the way that we're using AI, we're not specifically going, okay, here it is with no explanation and no control, because that's not something that we see as helpful. So it's not going to be a drag and drop on a file with to replace a plugin and boom, magically your audio is fixed, because that doesn't help you.
Right.
Adobe's just taken a bit of a dump into that water with their Adobe podcast tool in beta, which used to be Project Shasta.
Right.
And there's one of the things I noticed is you can drag your voiceover file or your podcast file onto their processor and it processes it for you, but it gives you zero explanation on what they're actually doing and how, and it gives you zero control on how much of it is done. So a lot of the time it's way more detrimental than it is helpful. And that's one of the things which I'm listening to as the PM who's looking after most of the content creation stuff right now. I'm spending a lot of time listening to the market and working out the things that people don't want, as well as what people do want.
Well, you guys walk this razor's edge, and I do too, between the professional engineer, the high-level, knowledgeable, golden-eared engineer, and the home studio, and the amateur, and the podcasters, and all of us working from home who don't have an engineering skill set background, and making tools that will satisfy both of those people's needs. It's you can't just, it's hard to have a one size fits all, right?
The first plugins that we did specifically for the market of people who wanted to be like the top of the food chain music mix engineers were called the Artist Signature Series, and we effectively took people like Tony Maserati, Chris Lord-Alge, Butch Vig, Jack Joseph Puig, Eddie Kramer, etc.
By the way, these are all like household names in
these are household names in the music industry,
right?
But we took them and we studied what they did in the signal chain for different instruments, whether it be a voiceover or guitar or otherwise. And then we modeled that chain and we put it into a plugin format that people could use without actually having to dig themselves or risk digging themselves into a hole by not knowing completely what they were doing, but kind of having that engineer or producer over their shoulder. And those are really, really successful until we suddenly started having this new kind of user who was even more impatient in a way and just wanted like something quick. And that's when we created the one knob series, which is one knob brighter, one knob pumper, one knob, lighter, one knob. It's like fatter. So we spend a lot of time trying very hard to give multiple options on how you could tweak and how much tweakability there is without insulting people's intelligence.
Sure, of course. That was a great question. Get it kicked off. Now we got Dave G saying, "G'day, love Brisbane." Is it Brisbane?
Brisbane.
Okay, thank you.
If anybody says Brisbane, I'm leaving.
Brisbane. Top 2 cities in Australia. What a river city. Anyway, tell us the state of home voiceover in Australia, and what is your philosophy on processing is less more?
Okay, so Australia has been the home of incredibly high quality radio production and voiceover production for arguably as long, if not a bit longer than the USA, in one specific area mostly, which is the adoption of things like Pro Tools and other really highly committed DAWs. When my brother and I used to have a company in an international company that we had based in San Diego that we owned called Fair West, which was a radio consultancy, and also we did loyalty programs for radio stations like Kiss FM and Ryan Seacrest, etc. But we saw an awful lot of radio production studios in the early 2000s, even up to some even still now, who were using things like Cool Edit, which is great, but at the same point in time, 90% of Australia was using Pro Tools in home studios or something similar. So the quality of demand that a network radio station like an Austereo radio station, Southern Cross now, or RG Capital has always been incredibly high, and they've always been very, very picky. So from a radio production point of view, when voiceovers do remote work, it's nearly always a case of, we want the minimum amount of compression on this and EQ on this as possible, so that when we put it into whichever production we're putting it into, we have the ability to actually control it and do what we want to do with it.
Right.
So yes, less is more. The only things that back in 2000, I was production director of the RG Capital Radio Network. So I was managing the production studios and production people of 95 radio stations, I think, at one time. The standard line was enough compression to control the dynamics just. Make sure that there's minimal background noise, and make sure that mic placement is optimal, and the rest leave it up to the producer, the production guy who's actually using the voiceover. If we would get, and I know that one of the people I trained who's now heading one of the radio networks over here again, if we received voiceovers that were looking a bit like an inchworm in the DAW, just lots of flat peaks, generally speaking, we would send them back and say, please, can you send us a more dynamic file?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Definitely less is more.
Yeah. Yeah, I know in the States that I think from talking to Andrew Peters on our podcast, the Pro Audio Suite.
Andrew
apparently,
Peters.
Yes, what a guy, eh? That voice. He says that what's common in Australia is not common in here. Here, voice actors are constantly having to do auditioning audition, audition, audition for every
Not over
single
here.
job, but not so much there, right? So
No.
here, like you're always, as an actor, you're selling yourself constantly, and you want that audition to sound in a way that it's making you come across as already pre-polished, you know?
Yeah.
So there's more processing, I think, that happens as a result of that. But at the same time, you don't want it to, it's like showing up at a date and you're wearing your theater makeup. If you overdo it, you're going to be laughed out of there. You're just not, it's not appropriate. It has to, another thing, the way I think of the processing is, I was just telling this to somebody the other day. If, if you don't know it's on, that's great. If you turn it off and you miss it, then your processing might be, it's probably good. Like
Right.
if it's, you don't even realize it's there until you shut it off and you go, I miss something. I don't like, it's not, then maybe you got it, right. Otherwise, if it's
I have a
enhancing too
line
much,
that
it's
I
like,
I have a line that I like to use. By the way, g'day Patricia in Florida. That's where I sold my house and moved from.
oh yeah.
There's a line which I always use when I've got an intern or work experience person working with me, and it's one of the first lines that I use to get into their head. And I use this as well with voiceovers when I'm starting to train voiceovers or guiding them. It's got to be the best edit that I never heard.
Right. Yes.
If I can hear the compression, it's too much. If I can hear the mid-frequency EQ, it's too much. If I can hear background noise and it raises up every time you stop talking, then there's way too much processing there. If I have consistent voice, and then when the voice stops and the background noise stays consistent as well and is low, perfect. Because that way, then it gives me something that, as a production person, that I can work with without worrying about trying to fix it. One of the disadvantages with this way of working in this new age, though, is you're going to come across more and more of these, and it's happened over the last 20 years, even more so. But I'm finding now as radio stations and different production houses start to get smaller and syndication becomes even worse, there's a lot more scenarios where radio DJs have to also do a bit of production in a radio station. And they have no clue. They signed on to be, they want to be a rock star and get an air check and go to a big cap city radio station. They don't
want to be a
do
personality. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, and when you get that, you've got two mental battles that you as voiceovers need to get over. One of them is the fact that you're working with somebody who really doesn't care that much. And the other one is the battle that they don't know as much as you know. So a lot of the time, it's a bit like when I'm in the music studio working with an artist, you have to be a bit of a psychologist and you have to help pat their ego a bit, but also make sure that you're giving them the best that you can possibly give them. And sometimes in a subtle way, quietly do their job for them.
It's a delicate thing.
As the advantage of making you sound as good as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's a delicate line to tread as well.
It really is. Yeah. Great questions. From Bob Leadham. Which
Bob.
plugin is most ideal for a voiceover, I guess, in the Waves lineup? He just threw two in here. Clarity VX, comparing these two. Clarity VX or NS1, which is the noise reduction.
Great question. So I actually love using both of these plugins. Now, there are scenarios and advantages for both of them. The first scenario is if you have you're in a room that you know well, and you have, say, for example, an air conditioner going, and it's just some consistent white noise in the background with a bit of a hum to it, then my suggestion would be NS1 all day long. It's like you just put the fader up just a tiny little bit, and you're going to find it does what you actually want it to do. It's one fader, It's ridiculously simple, and it does the job, and it does it
A little
with very
dabble do
little,
you? A little dabble do you, right?
very little CPU
Yeah.
usage.
Yeah.
And one of the things, go Toby, he yelled, "I love NS1." NS1 does this with virtually no CPU usage, and it's really low latency. So if you can get away with NS1 and it's consistent low, then that's the first one I go to. Clarity VX is one of our most successful launches ever at Waves.
Yeah.
It's also one of the plugins that we have put a ton of artificial intelligence into. You have 3 neural networks now. You have neural network 1, neural network 2, and then neural network eco, which takes up a lot less CPU. Clarity is going to work harder for you to actually find any noise or anything behind your dialogue or your voice that isn't dialogue or voice. And then it's going to give you a big shiny knob in the middle of the GUI and let you take it out. If you have Clarity VX Pro, you have the ability to actually fine tune where the noise is and tweak it and actually decide whether you're going to remove the noise or whether you're going to leave the noise and remove the voice, which for dialogue in movies in post-production is priceless. So I would say that both of them are really good good solutions, Bob, but I'm always going to go for the simplest one first. I'm not a believer in going for the biggest, shiniest object first. I'll go for my Swiss Army penknife. So I'll always go for NS1 first for consistent noise, because there's going to be other processing you're going to want to do, and Clarity takes up more. It's amazing, but it does take up more CPU, and I don't know how much CPU you've got. So
But I mean, a lot of us aren't doing real-time processing as much as we are doing post-processing, but Clarity clearly is a heavier tool that will slow down. You won't process through, if you're processing a whole bunch of files, it will take longer if Clarity is in there versus if you're using an S1. That is a fact for sure.
I mean, to give you an example of what I couldn't use NS1 for, but I can use Clarity for, I was in Salt Lake City in an Airbnb. I spent the first 6 months of actually a lot of the year last year, moving slowly across the states, Airbnb to Airbnb, just because I could. And I was in an Airbnb outside Salt Lake City in Provo, and this Airbnb was 2 townhouses. And on the other side of the wall from the room that I put my temp studio in, was the other townhouse. And the day that I was doing a webinar on Clarity VX and Clarity VX Pro for the launch, they were jackhammering next door, right through this drywall. So I had Clarity VX on my microphone live in a webinar to get rid of the jackhammers, and nobody heard the jackhammers because of that. And
amazing, yeah.
I heard them. I mean, it's I still kind of, flinched every time I heard it, but nobody else heard it. So people just thought I had a nervous tick.
Yeah, I look at Clarity as like
Leslie
a secret
saw
weapon.
that webinar.
Oh, okay.
Leslie saw that webinar. Thanks,
cool.
Leslie.
Yeah, I look at Clarity as like a secret weapon. You whip it out, and when you need that extra, for me, like it's the ultimate travel plugin.
Right. There's a question. There's a follow-on question just quickly from John Kuhn.
Yeah.
What is the guidance
John
on
Keen.
when Clarity VX Keen? Sorry, buddy. VX be updated for M1? It is. I'm using it on an M1 right now.
It's not running in Rosetta anymore. Yeah, it's native.
Yeah, it's native. Also, when you update, you'll get the new eco mode. So an eco neural network gives you a bit more chance to let your computer breathe a bit, because Clarity can get a bit intense.
Yeah, I have found, I'm not trying to get into an Apple conversation, but I found that the M1 silicon chips and the new processing is remarkably efficient. And I don't even care whether I'm using a heavy plugin or not. This system seems to handle it so efficiently. But if you're doing multi-track music with lots of plugins, you start adding up. The load starts to add up, and you have to really be a little more careful about what you use. So That makes sense. Anonymous says, is the de-esser, sibilance, and clarity considered editing tools or mastering tools? That's an interesting question.
Okay, these are definitely not mastering tools. I'm not going to use clarity, and when I'm mastering, I'm not going to use sibilance. Sibilance is designed to be on Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, I think.
All right.
Do I have the ability to do that?
Let's make sure you're allowed to. Let's see. Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, all right, so let's see how I do that. Share screen, there we go. Share screen, desktop 1, and share. So you guys should see Pro Tools now, right?
There it is.
Okay.
Yep.
So say for example,
don't try this at home, kids. Sharing
so
screen.
say for
with Pro Tools.
example, let's add sibilance. So sibilance. Okay, so there's sibilance, right? Now sibilance is designed to effectively just look ahead.
I love everything about this guy. Mike Rowe is fully dedicated to getting the tax-exempt status of Scientology.
So you see those little highlights there? That's telling me where there's sibilance.
I love everything about this guy. Mike Rowe is fully dedicated to getting the tax-exempt status of Scientology.
And now,
revoked. As if anyone
it's
needed
like
yet another.
I have more control on pulling them out. So this is not something that I'm going to use in a mastering scenario. This is something that I'm going to use on a track by itself, just to get rid of whatever it is I'm trying to get rid of. Now the other thing was de-esser. So let's move that out of the way. And
by the way, we're going to be doing an advanced processing tools webinar with Michael at the end of next month, where we get really deep and dig into these different sets of tools, compare and contrast what they do and don't do, and all that kind of stuff. So
this plugin, de-esser, is another really, really classic Waves plugin that uses what I like to refer to again as vintage code. It's one of our industry standards. This is again another way of de-essing, and effectively what a de-esser does is it cuts and reduces certain frequencies and in a way compresses them so that you don't hear as much of them. So it's a very, very tried and true traditional way of using a de-esser, of getting rid of sibilance, but it's not something that I would want to use in a mastering scenario. Clarity. If I go Clarity VX, this is noise reduction. If you're still doing noise reduction and noise suppression control when you get to your master, you have bigger problems to deal with that you should have dealt with earlier on in the process. This is another plugin that I'm going to use specifically to get rid of noise. So let's say, for example, is this one? What about this one? Okay, nope. There's got to be one of these with. There we go. So okay, cool. So this one has this female fixed mic in room.
So I'm just going to type in like resin hacks on YouTube and
It's a
just see
built-in
some of the videos that have got
camera
the biggest
microphone.
views.
Yep.
So the first one that I'm looking at is the
Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my two knobs here. So I've got three plugins here. I've got Clarity VX, MV2, and Emo 4. Let me go back to there. So I've created two macros: fixed microphone, remove noise. So let's do exactly that. So let's fix the microphone
So
first.
I'm just going to type in like resin hacks on YouTube and just see some of the videos that have got the biggest views. So the first one that I'm looking at is the lovely epoxy resin hacks and DIYs that will amaze you. This one is by 5 Minute Crafts and Play. So let's have a look. I'm just going to record my screen. So I'm just going to type in like resin hacks on YouTube.
So that's the kind of thing you use Clarity for. You don't use it really for getting rid of, doing anything in mastering. It's more, it's a fix.
Yeah.
It's a fix tool.
So when you turn that remove noise knob, is that turning other knobs behind the scenes? Is that what that's doing? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Studio Rack, and what Studio Rack does is it gives me the ability to create racks of plugins and save them as a preset, but also it gives me the ability to have macros that I can access. So for example, here I have, let me just turn these off.
How does it feel to have 3 shows on 3 different networks premiering in the same month?
Well, it's weird, man.
Okay, so in this case here, I have Arvox Emo Q4, which is an EQ, and somebody asked about NS1 earlier on, so NS1's in here as well. Why? Because I've got 2 voices.
How does it feel to have 3
it's
shows
relatively
on 3
quiet
different networks
noise.
premiering?
So let's turn them on. Body. So in body, I have, you can control the macros here. So in body, I have the compression, and then I'm also controlling the EQ with the gain in bands 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that way I can actually, so for example, if I bring this up for a second, I put that there, and then I bring this up and put that there. Now, as I move body, you'll see compression in the Arvox go up, and you'll see slowly the different EQ curves moving up as well, but slower. So when I put that into play,
How does it feel to have 3 shows on 3 different networks premiering in the same month?
Well, it's weird, man. And I think it might be unprecedented. And I know why you're nervous to ask it, because it sounds like I'm going to throw my arm out of its socket, pat
You're gonna
myself
break your
on the
arm.
back.
Yeah, right.
Hey, look at me, everybody. I got a podcast that's really killing it. I got a foundation.
so it gives me the ability to create things that do multiple things at the same time in different directions and at different stages. And this is one of those things where I talk about a lot of the time. You want to create a system that lets you make sure that you're working, that the computer and the software is working for you and you're not working for it.
Right.
And if I spend a lot of time going, okay, so there's Arvox, what do I want? I want the compression down there. Okay, there's Emo EQ4, let's that there. And it's like, that's not really doing. Whereas with a tool like this, I can have them open and I've got my settings there, and I can automatically just deal with it the way that I want to. So it gives me a lot more control over how I actually do these things.
I love it. You better believe I'm going to be making some of these processing chains for people, because
Well, Studio Rack's free.
Yeah.
It's one of the beautiful things, and it works in pretty much everything. So it's also the other thing about Studio Rack is you can actually, not just load Waves plugins. Effectively, if you want to, you can. Where is that? When you first open it, it asks you to scan your VST3 plugins folder, and it will load other companies' VST3s as well.
Whoa, that's a big deal. That's a pretty big deal. I'm really impressed by that. Yeah,
It's
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the demo on that. I knew that it was a chainer, but that adjustable macro functionality is really impressive. Really impressive.
Yeah. All right. What's the next question?
We got a bunch in here. Samuel Hoke says training a neural network to do only one thing, recognizing breaths, should be doable. The genius behind Clarity is that it is only doing that one thing. So he agrees, like, plugins that do one thing really, really well, it seem to make a lot of sense. So I get that. Toby says, with the versioning of Waves plugins, i.e. version 12, version 13, can you explain what the benefits are to users? As I have upgraded a few times, but I didn't notice a difference. So
Okay, cool.
why does that happen?
Okay, so there's a difference between the term upgrade and update. And I'm going to guess that Toby may have updated his Waves update plan. There's 2 or 3 things that happen with Waves update plans. First things first, Waves update plan is renewable every 12 months. One of the things that a lot of people miss is nothing stops working if you don't update your Waves Update plan. Your plugins are still yours. You own them outright. Waves Update plan is to keep people who have multiple things and multiple different operating systems current. And also for people who have bundles, a lot of the time we actually add plugins to bundles per year as well. So Gold Bundle has had more plugins added to it. So has Platinum, so has Diamond, so has Horizon. The SSL bundle last year we added the SSL EV2. One of the main things about Waves Update Plan is also the fact that we add presets. We add a ton of presets per time. And we also add compatibility with not only bug fixes for different DAWs, bug fixes for operating systems, etc. So my advice for Waves Update Plan is always, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If you are having some issues or you see something that's being added in the Waves Update Plan coming up, then by all means update. But if you're happy with where you're at and your system works as expected, then there should be no reason to update your Waves Update Plan. The other important thing is the Waves Update Plan doesn't get more expensive with time. It has a cap of $240. And the only way it goes over that is if you have multiple versions of different plugins or different bundles that you can't use at the same time on one computer. So, but we also explain that on the website now. It's like it says in big red letters, why is this over this amount? So, always pay attention to that as well so that you know what you're paying for. And also, if you actually need to do anything at all, we always let people know about the Waves Update Plan, but we don't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to do it. It's not like we're renting you back your plugins. It's all yours.
Got it. Leslie Carter says, in the US, we've been told to send raw audio files. Now, this is a loaded question because
it is a loaded question.
By whom?
The definition of raw as well.
First of all, the definition of raw. Second of all, in what context and by whom, right? But anyway, she goes on to say, if you're a seasoned engineer, are you giving it a little transparent signal processing? I guess she's saying.
If I'm a seasoned engineer, I'm giving it a lot of processing based on what I'm doing with it. So for example, if I'm using your voice, Leslie, and I'm say for example using it for a radio promo or a TV promo, then you can bet your bottom dollar there's going to be a lot of processing on your VO, whether it's doubling spread, whether it's a bit of delay, whether it's a bit of reverb, EQ. And the reason I do that is because I need it to cut through what else is in life, especially if it's going to be on the radio or TV. These days, we have to make sure as engineers and producers that we're cutting through life noise. The average person who watches TV now doesn't watch TV in silence. People don't sit around the TV, generally speaking, anymore and have nothing else going on in their life. There's kids talking, there's people on iPads, there's babies crying, there's traffic out the window, there's all these different conversations and things going on. So as a seasoned engineer getting a voiceover, the first thing I have to do is make sure that when I'm producing it and I'm putting the production together, I'm listening as low as humanly possible to that audio, and I'm making your voiceover cut through at that level, because that's the level that I need people to be able to hear your voice. So this is also one of the reasons why I want to get a piece of audio that is as clean as possible so that I'm not double processing and I'm not over processing, because what that generally does is just bring up the noise floor, and that makes it messy. So now to the other side of the question, which is raw files. The definition of raw file in my professional view is a teeny weeny bit blurred. If I'm talking about photography or video files, raw files means sending them the uncompressed 4K shot files or raw video files or raw photography files, and I'm never going to do that. Now, as far as voiceover talent, if I was you, would have a chain of compression and EQ that is your standard MO. that is, this is what I record through. This is, hey, this is me. I'm talking now. Yeah, that's the way you make
your
yourself
stack,
sound.
as we
That's
kind
your
of use that
exactly,
vernacular for a while. Yeah.
Now, your stack should be printed onto your voice so that your voice files always sound consistently to your brand and who you are. Those files are the ones that you should send to your clients. You should never send a client something that doesn't have that brand stack on it. Definitely never send them something that could risk putting you in a bad light if it's being used by an engineer or producer who has very little experience, because the only thing that does is make it look bad on you, and then people tend to get judgy and go, oh, that's a terrible voiceover, when it's nothing to do with the voiceover. It has everything to do with the numpty that tried to produce it and did it badly. So my suggestion would be your definition of raw file may be different to theirs, and you should send out something that has the clean, very little bit of less is more compression and EQ that is your brand. That's what I believe you should send out as raw files.
You heard it right here, folks. Alan August says, how do you see Clarity VX fitting into, since we're speaking of stacks, a processing stack? Would you use it in a processing stack? And what else would you use in that stack? So that was Alan's question. So would you use Clarity as like I need Clarity on this one file today because it's a noisy day and there's a trash truck and blah, 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 blah. Or would you just say, I'm going to put Clarity in my stack and it's always going to be in there?
So for example, this is a preset that I created for, which will be available at some time soon, called Female Fixed Mic in Room. So this is a built-in microphone on a camera or a phone. The room, I could see on the video, it was tile. The microphone was about 5 to 8 feet away from the person talking on camera, and that's what gave us this sound. So
play. So let's have a look. I'm just going to.
Not ideal. So in that kind of chain, yes, Clarity is always going to be there for me. Now, if you guys are doing what you do oh so well, there shouldn't be too many times that you actually need Clarity, but you should consider having it in a chain. So for example, this chain here, this is called Pro VoiceOver. Okay. Now, Pro VoiceOver, let me just press play on this. So I have Arvox, which is a vocal compressor that has 3 faders, super smooth and easy to use on the surface, but it's going like the clappers with lots of things going on under the surface. Then I have Audio Track, which is a great channel strip. And then I have Clarity VX. And again, I've got these set up to 2 different knobs. Now, if I turn this off, this is I should probably unsolo so I can, okay.
But to the way we analyze any part of this life.
Okay, so there's some noise there. So first things first, let's pull the knobs down. And by the way, the reason I use knobs is not just to design plugin settings for people who don't know what they're doing. I use them too. Why? I'll tell you why. Because if your brain and your eyes are constantly looking at plugin parameters while you're trying to tweak EQ, compression, noise reduction, or anything else, your eyes are doing half of the job of your ears. If, however, you spend less time looking at those exact parameters and more time listening while you're just literally moving a knob up, you give yourself a better chance at doing the job properly because your ears are more engaged. So let's turn the stack back on and okay. Okay, so let's clean it up first.
The way we analyze any part of this life, for instance, if you went to a country, you could say, well, how good is their music and how well, you could use any criteria, but what about how close are they as a society so that everybody can.
So this is a chain that I will nearly always use clarity in, where I've got a low level voice. There's some consistent noise in the background that does actually, if you take a look at this file, you can see there in between, it's just a bit thicker than it should be. It's like there's noise there. So
You could.
it's only about -50, but it's noise. And if I use NS1, it's a bit more noise than I would want to use with NS1 because NS1 does things in a slightly different way. I'm going to use Clarity VX on this because I don't want any of it touching my voiceover. So if I, let's put the presence back first and just listen to this again and have a listen to how much clarity doesn't touch the voice.
But to the way we analyze
So presence, EQ and compression has been done.
any part of this life, for instance,
Okay.
if you went to a country, you could say, well, how good is their music, and how well you could use any criteria. But what about how close are they?
So this is one of those areas where, yes, I have Clarity VX on chain a lot of the time, but you'll notice where it is. It's not first, it's last. Because in this case here, I want to make sure that the first thing I deal with is the presence, okay?
But
I want to make sure that the voice is there. And then I can choose, okay, so how much do I really need to clean up?
but to the way we analyze any part of this life, for instance, if you went to a country, you could say, well, how good is their music, and
Presence is my priority. And then once I've got that, then I can deal with the noise. So, and Clarity is a great tool to do that with.
Brilliant. All right, we might need to go into high gear because we have a lot to get to. And
That's
just
fine.
to remind you guys, whatever we don't get to today, you're going to get more opportunities because we're going to be doing 2 more webinars with Michael where we get a lot of time to get into the nitty gritty. But this has been great. Thank you. Pedro Pena says, greetings from Houston. With the rise of remote podcast guests using AirPods in podcast interviews, I guess the microphones mainly, what plugin would be ideal to remove the echoes and noise? I started trying Adobe Podcast, but I've noticed it garbles short sounds. Thank you.
Yes, it does. Great. Pedro, thanks for the question. So 2 things. Number one, what Adobe has done is amazing with their tool. However, the biggest problem I see with it is the simple fact that you cannot control the processing that's being done. It's just basically drag and drop or turn it on and off it goes. That's an
It's
issue.
like a party trick. It's like a party trick right now. It's not really
Descript.com does it better because with Descript, you have the ability to turn on studio sound and then you've got a fader that lets you choose how much of it you actually want.
Right.
Adobe hasn't got that far yet.
Right.
Now, your question is actually twofold for me. One of them was AirPods and the other one was getting rid of improving the sound. The first thing I would say is, when I have a guest, and I've done a lot of webinars with a lot of people and a lot of superstars who all wear AirPods, the first thing I do is I make sure that the room that they're in isn't a kitchen or isn't a room with a tile floor because I need to be able to minimize as much of the acoustic bounce as possible before I actually start trying to do any processing. Now, you can do quite a lot with AirPods to make them sound good. The stack that I would use is pretty much what I was just using then. Arvox, Clarity VX, and an EQ like a 4-band or a 6-band EQ. Now, the reality is of all of this that you do though have to make sure that if you've got somebody who's using AirPods, you're making sure that that person is in the best possible space for you visually if it's a visual thing, or audibly if it's just audible. And if possible, the first thing I will say to any guest is, ideally, I would prefer it if you weren't using AirPods. Ideally, I would put you in front of a microphone so that you sound as good as you possibly can. By using AirPods, you are actually degrading your own audio, which stops me giving you the best chance of sounding as good as you can. And I'm very blunt with that. That's pretty much how I word it, because you can't polish a turd, or in Australia we say you can't turn shit into strawberry jam. The simple reality is, I've had some of the biggest superstars in the world come into a webinar that I've done and hosted using AirPods, and I am very clear this is not acceptable unless it's an absolute backup plan. So the onus is on you to make sure that if you're bringing in remote guests, that you give them as much warning ahead of time of these are the expectations that I'm aiming towards that make you, as the remote guest, sound as good as you possibly can. Boom.
Thank you. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. Patricia asks, just to tag along on the previous answer, probably a while ago, I don't own any Waves, but I definitely am looking to get into it. What do you recommend along the lines of plugins, but mainly settings for female voiceovers? So would it be anything different from what you've already been demoing in the Studio Rack?
Nada. It's exactly the same. So Patricia, the first thing I would say is the world of plugin processing is one that you're going to see a lot of marketing on from Waves and other companies. My suggestion is take serious advantage of the trial periods of plugins before you purchase anything, and try things to see how they work for you and how they work into your creative flow. If you're doing remote voiceover work from home, then I'm always going to suggest Clarity VX, not necessarily Clarity VX Pro, because that's more post-production than voiceover, but definitely Clarity VX. I'm definitely going to suggest plugins like Arvox and Dave G. I've just spent $35 on a Waves plugin. Arvox is a really good voiceover plugin that's a magical tool and a good EQ. Those are the three things that I would suggest that you utilize. But trial periods. Don't buy anything unless you go, you know what, I can use this. I don't like it when people have a pile of plugins and then, they don't know what 3/4 of them do. That's not the best way to spend the money.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, man. Great answer. Tom O, does NS1 remove or just mask the background noise?
NS1 suppresses it. So NS1 is a bit more of a traditional plugin. It doesn't remove anything. It just moves it out of the way so that you can't hear it, and it's not part of the track anymore.
Is NS noise suppression one? Is that what
it's
that is?
noise suppression.
Got it.
Noise suppression one, as in one fader.
Gotcha. Does Clarity VX reduce inconsistent background noise? I think you did answer this.
Yes.
What if the noise overlaps closely with an actor's voice frequency range?
Okay, so there's a couple of different things you can do here. The first one, and because you asked, I am speeding this up.
And this is more of a post-production question he's asking in this case.
Yeah, but it's a good one. So if I open up Clarity VX, okay, so let's just close that for a second, or move it over there. So if I open up Clarity VX, right, you'll notice that you've got neural network here, and you've got 3 neural networks. You've got Broad 1, Broad 2, and Broad Eco, which is like Broad 1, but it's a bit more eco-friendly, so it's a bit more economy-wise. So if I go Broad 1, it says at the bottom of the plugin, better for keeping voice, detail, and secondary speech. Broadband 2 network is better for severe ambience, keeps mostly the main voices. And Broad Eco, dialogue speech only, consistently less. So for inconsistency, I would say go with Broad 2. Now, once you've made adjustments to this, if it's not working completely for you, then hit the reset button on the network, because the network learns and adapts things as it goes, and it's going to listen to different parts, and it's going to find the different ways that it can actually work to get rid of this for you. The other thing that you can do is you can go, okay, right, so let's adjust the width of this. So if you're in a room, but you have or you're dealing with something that's come in stereo and there's a voice in the middle, then you need to clean it up. Take the width and just take it down to 0, so you're dealing with mono. And this here, you can do single analysis, which analyzes the sum of the stereo channels, or double, which is the one that will look for different channels and different kinds of noise, randomness for you. So you have options here that gives you the ability to tweak. This is something that you can definitely do.
Excellent. Next up from Alan again. He says, I have VX and Pro. He's an overachiever, I guess, of clarity. Trying to figure out what I still need. An EQ for high pass. What do I do to reduce car noise or rustling of clothing? So a couple more. He wants to buy more plugins. Can you sell them anymore? Or?
So this plugin here is the Q10. So Q10 is a 1-band, 2-band, 4-band, 6-band, and 10-band paragraphic EQ.
You can decide how crazy it looks. You can make it crazy, a lot more simplify it.
So I can go Q and you'll see, okay, so let's go Q1. Okay, so in this case here, in music sessions and voiceover sessions where, like, so for example, Andrew Peters, if I was doing a session with Andrew Peters spends a lot of time right up close to the microphone. So every single little crack and pop or everything in his voice is all there. And all of the timbre and the characteristics of the voice is all there. Now, a lot of the time, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to take that and I'm going to want to put a high pass on that so that I can get rid of the low rumble. So the question was car noise. Okay, car noise, generally speaking, is a low pass. Rustling of clothes, that's a slightly different one. So rustling of clothes, this is also a great tool for that. And what you would do is you would listen in and you would...
But...
so for example, let's just...
But to... the way we analyze
you would work out where it is
any part of this life,
and then you would take that frequency and you would take that and you would notch the crap out of it. So in this case here, I would literally just notch it and then sweep the filters until I got rid of my rustling noise. This is an amazing tool for that. This is the oldest plugin we've ever made. This was we released this. This is the first plugin we ever released. It was 1990.
Holy cow. That's incredible. I had no idea.
This is what it looked like then. So
the retro version. The 25th anniversary. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. This one's a very quick answer.
Yes.
Yes, and yes. Can I use it on a PC?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a PC right behind me that's got Windows 11 on it, and I've got all the DAWs and all the Waves tools, DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere. Yeah, it works on them all.
Got it. B. Carlson, didn't realize you can use Clarity VX live. I guess meaning like real time. Can you use it with Zoom?
Yes, you can. So one of the suggestions that I'm going to make to you is. If you want to use it on Zoom, obviously you have to have a way of actually processing your vocal first through a chain, either in your DAW or through software that comes with the USB microphone that lets you use plugins, etc. I use Clarity VX a lot with camera work and webinars. Because there's not really too much of a frame out of sync with the voice. It doesn't have, I mean, okay, I can show you the latency. Okay, so if you were in Studio Rack, right? If you right click on a channel and you look down the bottom, you will see I'm hovering over Clarity VX right now. Clarity VX has a latency of 42 milliseconds, and the rack latency is 44 milliseconds. Now, syncing that up with other really low latency audio in a music session might be a bit of a challenge. However, making that fit lip sync is not hard at all. In fact, I don't even use a delay because video takes longer than voice. So I use this a lot on calls if I need to. I mean, the Waves webinar on Clarity DX, I had jackhammers in the room next door. So
it's pretty supernatural almost. It's pretty amazing.
Diego.
Yeah. Do you have, or are you working in a plugin like the C-Suite CVox noise and ambience reduction plugin? I think you do have one that's very similar to that plugin.
What, is it a bundle? Is that the question?
C-Suite is a plugin. I think that's a universal audio plugin, actually. It's a noise reduction that's akin to Cedar. The C in C-Suite actually stands for Cedar.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a plugin called
WNS, right?
WNS.
Yeah.
NS. This one here may look awfully familiar. Actually, it disappeared. Hold on. So WNS. Yes, there we go. So WNS, Waves Noise Suppressor. This works the same as a Cedar. You run the noise through it. You press suggest, it suggests, and then you have control over the ability to do it. Now, I've actually used this to de-room a room sometimes as well. But I've used this a lot recently in conjunction with a bit of Clarity or NS1 to do combinations of stacks, so to speak. I don't like putting all of my processing eggs in one specific tool. I like to move it across different tools so that I'm not bit crunching or losing quality.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to hammer through the last few, and we're going to be done. 2 more questions. Danny Burnside says, any words of wisdom on effectively switching from voiceover to vocals on the fly? For example, an animation audition with 2 parts, dialogue, then singing. Oh, that's a good question. Some people have to have both in one audition, I guess.
Yeah. So I use a Stream Deck, which is a macro controller that I've set up some custom remotes on that let me do things, like that.
That's a baby one.
That let me do things like set up macros around specific chains or processing chains, and I can flick between them. The other way that you could do it is you could have your same microphone going through 2 different channels as part of the audition, but processed differently. And then when you get to the second one, mute the first one and go to the second one. Make sure that your levels are on par, but the processing is different. Therefore, you'll hear yourself differently. Therefore, you'll be in character for the right selection. So,
great answer. That's an interesting question. Leslie, last question. This is from Leslie Carter. What's the best way to, in post-production, set debreath to debreath, say, a 3-minute dialogue without clipping off some of the lower velocity words?
You're going to need to tweak. You're going to need to tweak that. And for a 3-minute dialogue, honestly, my personal suggestion would be do it step by step and do it manually. One of the other things is in this day and age, with our screens being bigger and our speakers being better and DAWs being more exact. I don't know about you guys, but I can see the breaths before I actually hear them. And a lot of the time, I'll de-breath a vocal or a dialogue track just with my eyeballs and then just go back and tweak accordingly. I know specifically because I do so much voiceover work, I know what my breaths look like. And I can go in and I can literally de-breath something while, just by looking at it, and then I can just go back and listen to it. When I listen to it, I'll look elsewhere. I will not look at the screen because then my eyes are doing the work for me because my eyes are telling my brain and my ears when the breaths aren't there. So I always look away. But In this day and age, I would say that there are better tools than Debreather. Debreather, though, it's still a good tool, but it's got a lot of latency, and that's going to mess with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good at selling things to people that I don't think you need, and I don't think you need that plugin right now.
Yeah, and I think also people over debreath things sometimes. There are times where it's called for, but a lot of times it's just not.
Right. And this is one of the reasons why I think that a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll spend more time bringing down the breaths with clip gain or a similar tool in other DAWs rather than getting rid of them.
Right.
And the occasional big breath, like I'll get rid of that.
Sort of a big gasping breath, yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, I have marks on my scripts that tell me when I can take a big breath and when I can take half breaths. The half breaths I leave in, I just suppress, but it's the big breaths before a paragraph that I'll take out.
Makes sense. Well, I want to respect your time and everybody else's and put a pin in this one because we've covered a huge amount of ground in an hour, and I thank you so much for that, Michael.
You're welcome.
And we're going to see more of you around here. This was all about getting to know you a little bit, get everybody familiar with who you are in my community, and that's what we did today, and I think we did a great job of that. I would be an idiot if I didn't offer you guys a discount code for the next 2 webinars. So if you enter at checkout for the next 2 webinars, if you enter GTT MPA AMA20, got that? GTT MPA AMA20, you'll get 20% off on your signups for the beginners and advanced Waves webinars with Michael. So those are 2-hour-long webinars, and we get a lot more time to dig deeper into this stuff, compare things. And the advanced one is really going to be getting into some more nitty-gritty about choosing like certain de-essers or why you would choose one EQ over a different EQ and comparing the character of different modelings of things and et cetera. It's going to get more deep into the technical engineering side of this stuff, but that's the whole goal. So you'll come back for that, right, Michael?
Mm-hmm.
Please?
Absolutely.
I'll be screwed if you don't show up. But thank you so much.
One last question. Don Dean says, can one Waves copy be used for 2 computers? If your Waves update plan is up to date, then yes. You get 2 licenses. So that's one of the perks of Waves update plan.
Thank you for mentioning that and checking the chat. Anyway, we're going to let you all go. We're going to let you go, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks,
See you,
everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.